Hi everyone and welcome back to my top 500 games. We are currently at number 238, which is Hell Yeah! Wrath of the Dead Rabbit. This is an indie game that came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3 as digital downloads, as they usually do. And the idea behind this game is that it's a 2D side-scrolling platform game. Apart from it sort of has elements of a twin-stick shooter in that you do use the right analog stick to aim your shots. You also ride around in this chainsaw thing, which you also use as well every now and then. But the main story behind this game is that you are Ash, who is this rabbit who lives in hell, and something happens. It's either an embarrassing photo or an embarrassing video gets shared around, and he hates people seeing this video or this photo. I forget what it was. I think it was a photo, I'm not so sure. But he hates people seeing it, and his goal is to kill everyone that has seen it. So throughout the entire game, you'll have all these different little monsters scattered around all these worlds, and they'll all be saying things like, ha ha ha, I can't believe you were wearing that thing, or something like that. And then you proceed to kill them, and you have all of these weird little mini games for when it comes to killing them. Like there's a weird Guitar Hero one, or there might be a button mashing one, but different ways to kill them in different gruesome ways. But what makes this game mostly fun is just the platforming and the shooting, just the general stuff, not the whole story behind it, even though, you know, people will like the story. And it is quite a funny story, and it is quite wacky and out there, I suppose. I mean, it is, but it is just generally a good game, just for the fact that it's a platformer and you've got the nice shooting and stuff. Although I will say, story-wise and theme-wise, I do really like the Happy Land. That is quite funny, because you've got all of these singing flowers, singing about how happy they are, and Ash is saying things like, oh my god, please let it stop, because he can't stand the happiness. But it's quite funny. Number 237. This is a game that is it's just absolutely exploded all over the internet. This game is Minecraft, and Minecraft is huge. Minecraft has become its own genre of video on YouTube, which is crazy that there would be a genre dedicated to this one specific game, and it's very popular amongst kids as well. But I do like Minecraft, and I do have some stories to tell you, but I've never gotten this whole big fad. I mean, I understand the whole idea of it's like Lego, it's creativity. You can build a house, you can build all these different weird contraptions and stuff. You can build replicas of things from TV shows or games or whatever. You can create your own world. You can create these little contraptions as well that can do all these crazy things. I understand that, and I think that's great. I understand also that there's this whole lore behind it and this whole franchising behind it with the creepers and all that as well. You know, stuff like that. And you've also, obviously, the videos on YouTube have played into this as well, such as all those music videos, which are just strange. But I'm going to talk about my specific experiences with this game, because I don't really have too much experience when it comes to the main game, that is just the regular mode, survival mode, I think it's called, where, you know, you have to survive, you have to collect resources to then build things. No, I have stories more to do with the creative mode, and this is quite ridiculous because, like, creative mode, it is kind of ridiculous the way that you can make things just on the spot. You don't have to work towards making anything. But I got this game on the Xbox 360, and a few of my friends also had it, namely Random DCE. He was playing it, and there was a few of us in that group, and we were all playing it on the same map. And so there was Random DCE, myself, and Kari Okami, who were all playing on this map. And it was on Random's own server, it was on his profile, and so the idea was that we just used this map to create whatever we wanted, and we did eventually lose the data to it. Either that or we lost access to it, even though he could go on it, but we couldn't get onto it maybe. But I'm going to tell you the story about what happened. Now, this would have been early 2010, so somewhere like it would have been after 2010, I believe. It may have been 2011, around that time. And the way that it worked is that we each had our own individual dedicated areas of the map to work on. This is how we started. We had to build something. So Random built this weird palace thing, and then Kari built this giant sprite, and I built this glass tower with the Velolympics. Obviously, because I'm Velocity 11, it was the Velolympics, and I'd have signs saying, "Welcome to the Velolympics." And I'd say to them, right, we need to turn creative mode off and go onto this map, and we need to try out the Velolympics. And what it was you'd climb this tower and you'd have this path of diamond blocks in the air, and it split off into two paths. One path led you all the way around the map to the other side, and at that other side there'd be a sign saying you've gone the wrong way. So then you'd have to turn around and go all the way back. And if you went the other way, you had all these floating these floating diamond blocks just in the sky. And I remember I was like stood at the bottom, watching random, just looking up at him, jumping across all these blocks because they're all like evenly spaced blocks, and you have to like jump from them one at a time, like really high above ground. So obviously if you fell, you'd have to like climb and do it all again. But I was watching him jumping across all these platforms, and he made it to the end. And then at the end, there's this room in the sky, and it says, "Congratulations" on a sign. And then you step forward a bit and you fall down, and then you get to this other sign, and it says, "Step forward to claim your prize." And he was just said, "Oh no, I'm not falling for that." Right? Which was a shame, because if he had, he would have he would have stepped forward and then just fallen into a pit of lava. Yeah, that was funny. But also after that, we just started messing around. So we also made some like other like sprites around the map, and one of them also made this wicker man that they blew up, and they also made this spaceship. And I had this series of glowing blocks that said YMCA on it, and then a little sign over it that says it's fun to stay out there. But the biggest thing that I did in that map was just like to the side, I built this giant satanic shrine. And it had like this staircase that like went up, and at the top of this, it had another staircase that went up to this giant pedestal, and on that was a giant sign that just said "Repent" across it, and it was all like red and black, and it was like covered in torches and stuff. It was funny. I still have some pictures of that shrine, and I will show them sometime. Not now. I might do in a bonus episode, so stick around. But yeah, I will do that. But yeah, I've spent a long time talking about that, but that was a very interesting memory, and I just really wanted to make sure that I talked about it. Number 236 is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. Not the movie, because this isn't a top 500 movies list, it's a top 500 games list. It is the game. And this is a beat 'em up. Basically, the movie, I have seen the film, but the film is about just these kids. I'm not going to go into all the details, but the idea behind the film is that it's meant to be like a game, where you've got the main character who has to fight all these other people, and they are treated as bosses, as if it was a game, so to speak. And so it's kind of like a game of a film that's meant to be a game, sort of, if you know what I mean. But it's a pretty standard beat 'em up. But what I like about this game, as what I usually like about games in general, is that it has a leveling system. Yay! But the leveling itself really only gives you new abilities, which isn't really that interesting, I don't think, for a beat 'em up game. I mean, button combinations and stuff to learn new abilities has never been that interesting to me. But also what is interesting is that you can buy things with the money that you find, and you can upgrade your stats by buying those things. And the things that you buy, you can buy them at different places, so certain shops and certain levels sell certain types of food, and different types of food will increase your stats in different ways. Sometimes it would be like so much money for like a bit of this stat and a bit of that stat, or it might be a lot of money for a lot of this one stat that's a bit different or something. And so you've got this balancing going on of money and different stats, and trying to find out which way to invest your money. And I really like that stuff. That's just stuff that I really like in general. Also, probably just me, but the final level was really hard. I don't know if that was just me, but I really did feel like that. Number 235 is Rallycross. This is a racing game. It was on the same vein as V-Rally, which I talked about ages ago. That was like number 401, I think it was. Yeah, all the way back then. But I did play it about the same time as V-Rally, but I played it a lot more. I mean, I'm not sure if I did, but it feels like I did, because my memories of it are much more vivid. I remember the different racetracks and how you'd have different variations of the different racetracks, and the cars jumped around a lot. It was very dirt what's the term I'm thinking of? Monster truck, that's the thing I'm thinking of. It was much more monster truck based, so you had lots of jumping around and stuff. And really, I don't have too much to say about this. I just remember the different like races, and I remember there's one stage which is kind of like this arena, sort of like this, you know, like this racetrack, like a NASCAR track maybe, I suppose. But you could unlock different variations of that track where you would sort of go inside like the different indoor areas as well, and that was interesting. It was, I don't know, it's one of those games where I don't feel like I should have so much nostalgia for it, but I kind of do. But yeah, there's something about it that I can't put my finger on that I did really enjoy about this game. Number 234 is a game that I think is super overrated and doesn't deserve anywhere near as much praise as it does get. So this is going to be quite a negative review, sort of speak, of the game. Even though I do like the game, of course I rank it at number 234. It is Portal. This game was treated as if it was the best puzzle game ever, or it was just amazing. Like, I like the game, and I think it's clever, the way that you shoot the portals, and you've got to think about different trajectories, and the way that you fall into things, and the way you, like, shoot out, and you've got to think about the different machines, and lining things up. It was quite clever, especially for a 3D game, but I just think there's so much hype around this game. There's just so not deserving. Well, maybe hype's not the right word because, you know, it's an old game now, but I just feel like there's just so much praise surrounding this game that I don't think it deserves. It might just be me, I don't know. It might be because I'm really deeply into the idea of puzzles and strategy and all that, you know, thinking type of game, I suppose, that maybe I just have a higher standard. I don't know, but then I'm not saying that people who really like it have low standards, at least I'm not trying to say that. But I will just explain. For one, I don't think the game's all that funny, to be honest. The cake is a lie thing is just whatever. The whole GLaDOS thing as well. People say that GLaDOS is like the best villain ever. Oh. Okay, usually I don't care about characters or whatever. When things say the best character of all games, I'm not bothered. But I don't think GLaDOS is that funny. I mean, I think there's a few like little humorous bits here and there, but I generally don't think that GLaDOS is funny overall. And this game is treated so highly, I just don't understand it. But I feel like I don't really have to explain this game because I think that it's pretty well known enough that I shouldn't have to. I will say that I never completed this game, but I do believe I got pretty far. I did certainly get past the point where you break out of the test chambers. The first time I played it, I got out of the test chambers and I was thinking, alright, I'm near the end. But the next time I played it, I did that same thing, but I got quite a bit further, and I still didn't reach the end, so I don't know exactly how long this game is. Okay, number 233 is Pinball Dreams. So this is a pinball game, so I shouldn't really have too much to say about it. It doesn't have much in terms of features, it's just a set of 4 pinball machines and you gotta try to get the high score. There isn't any extra features other than that, really. But I had this game on the Amiga. One of the things I remember about this game is that I think this is one of the few games that I had not copied, so it was like a legitimate copy of the game. And I remember the cover for this game had a pinball table, and the pinball itself had the reflection of this man, just doing this really creepy smile. It's hard to describe, but I remember finding that pretty freaky at the time. But yeah, you've got the 4 pinball tables. There's Ignition, Steel Wheel, Beatbox, and Nightmare, each with their own themes, and obviously you know how pinball works. I'm not going to explain exactly how pinball works. But this was actually my first pinball game, because it was on the Amiga, and I don't think I'd even heard of pinball at this point. But what was also interesting in the game is that this is a game that my uncle had. Now, I'm not talking about my Uncle Darren here. My Uncle Darren is the person who I've talked about many times before. He was into racing games, all that. Yep, I've mentioned him several times. No, this is a game that my Uncle Kevin had. My Uncle Kevin is on my dad's side of the family, and it was really strange to think of my Uncle Kevin playing games, especially a game that I had played. I remember one time going to his house and he would play Pinball Dreams, and he'd have this big TV. Of course, this is relatively speaking, it wouldn't be very big now, but when I was that young, and at that time, as in early 90s, it would have appeared to me to be a big screen, and I remember finding that really interesting, and I found that quite exciting. Also, I later got this game on the PSP when it came out on the PS Minis. There's 2 things that I wanted to talk about. One thing that I noticed about the PS Mini version itself, and one thing that I noticed about the game in general from playing the PS Minis version. One thing that I noticed just about the game overall ball is that underneath the flippers you have this little peg, so if the ball falls down in between the flippers, it doesn't necessarily count as you losing the ball. It could bounce off the peg, but the peg is actually really interesting because what it also means is that if you have the flippers flipped up and it goes down, it's not going to be able to bounce up. So you've got this sort of balance between flipping up and down, between relative spaces of where the ball is. That was interesting. But also with the PS Mini version specifically, you could play the game sideways, so you could flip the game on its side so that you could hold the PSP on its side and then use X and triangle as the buttons for the flippers. And I had never seen a game played like that before. I thought that was really interesting. And it really works as well with the portrait view because of, you know, a pinball table. They're tall, they're not wide. Number 232 is Micro Machines. This is another game that I had on the Amiga, and I think this was my first racing game ever. So we've just had my first pinball game. This is my first racing game, or at least I think it was. Micro Machines, it's a racing game, but it's the top-down view of a racing game. So basically what that means is that you're always looking down at the top of the vehicles, which means that pressing left and right would depend on which way you're facing, and your view is obviously not always going to be relative to that. So say if you're travelling downwards through the screen, you can press left and right to move left and right relative to which way the vehicle is facing, but it won't be relative to the screen, which I think I got a grasp of that pretty quickly. I know this is the type of thing that people tend to struggle with. Tank controls, I mean, I know it's a racing game so it's different, but tank controls in general is something that people do struggle with, but it's something that I find a lot easier to adapt to than say something like non-inverted camera controls, which I just can't deal with, but that's a separate topic. So yeah, the idea is that you are the red car and, well, I say car, but you go through a different set of vehicles. But the first level is set in this bathtub and you have to complete 3 laps of this bathtub in order to be able to progress to the next level, which is like the first proper race. But when I first played this game, I didn't understand the concept. I didn't know what I was meant to do, so I just kept failing over and over again. But yeah, you go around and you do 3 laps of this bathtub and then you go to the next race. And you always have these series of races and each race can have its own individual type of theming. So for example, you can have the buggies, and the buggies race on top of this breakfast table where you have like all these little Cheerios that are scattered around to make the racetrack. What's interesting about this particular game is that the racetrack doesn't have specific boundaries. For the most part, there are exceptions, but the racetrack doesn't have specific boundaries for where you can go. It's kind of just like a guideline of where you should go, and if you try to skip past, if you just leave the track and go off to try to cut corners, then your car will just explode. But usually if it's only just like a minor corner, you know, like it's like a little turn, then that's fine. You can't just like jump across the entire track. And you'd have different obstacles along the way. So on like these breakfast table levels, you'd have boxes of cereal and then like ramps that will get you to jump over the boxes of cereal, and you'll have little spillages of honey which slow you down. There are also the school table type levels where you play the sports cars, and they are really fast. And in those ones, what makes those ones specifically difficult is that there's going to be bridges that you will come across made out of rulers, and they can be pretty thin, and your cars are fast, so you'll fall off them quite a lot. I also remember there was the tank levels, which I wasn't so keen on. With those ones, you could shoot bullets, and all I really remember is that you crossed over like chessboards and stuff. And there was also like another tank type level where you played as these weird little tank type vehicles with spikes on, and these were done in like construction offices where you had like spillages of oil, you know, like pens and spanners around everywhere. And I wasn't too keen on the combat, so to speak, of these games. You also had the dune buggy levels where it was across sand, and those levels had like bits of water. It was kind of like a sandbox, like a literal sandbox. I'm not talking about the gaming term here, I'm talking about like the literal sandbox. And I also remember you had the helicopter levels where each player was a helicopter, and in those levels the walls were the actual boundaries of the racetrack. So you had to do all these levels in a set order, and you basically had so many lives in order to be able to get through. And you had all these different characters as well, and I think they varied in capabilities. So like at the top you'd have like Spider and Jethro, I think he was called, and someone else who I don't really remember. And at the bottom you'd have Mike, I think. I don't entirely remember all of the characters, but for some reason I had it in my mind where it was sort of like confirmed that Spider and Jethro were like the two best ones. I think his name is Jethro, I don't remember. It was kind of like those two were like the best ones, but I don't know how I know that. I kind of just like feel that I do know it, which makes me think I might be wrong. So yeah, I always generally try to play as those two so that I didn't have to come up against the better characters in the game. And I got stuck on one of the later levels, which was on the school tables, the ones with the sports cars, because they were just really fast and you had to cross all these like tight bridges along these rulers. It just got too hard. One racetrack I forgot to mention is the pool table. So you've got this pool table and you've got all these playing cards that act as ramps, and you've got to avoid all these pool balls, and sometimes you've got to like go into the pockets in order to come out at the other sides of the pockets. It's a very interesting game thematically, and it's something that if you've not played, you should play, or at least watch a video of it, because it's really creative with how it does all these things. But I'm going to end this here, so thank you all for listening. I realise I kind of rambled on a few games more than others this time round, but I will end this here, so thank you all for listening. I'll see you all next time.